a lot of the drywall is being replaced in there, that it's being reconfigured. New HVAC system, new wiring for the shop machinery. A lot of that's 480 volt wiring that has to be added. The shop already had 480 access, but that's being added back to that side of it to run the machine tools. And then, of course, plumbing to the shop. That's something that hopefully will happen this summer with some of the grant money that the organization has, because I guess when Seaboard or whoever it was at the time put that in, they put it in, dumped the coal dust back around it, and over the last 30 or 40 years, that has completely eaten away the pipe that ran from the street up to the yard, or up to the shop, because they did not isolate it. So that's something that has to be done this year. Another thing that happened, Norfolk Southern actually gave a $15,000 grant for some things, and a lot of that went to insulating the shop, which is, I don't know, kind of ironic that NS paid to insulate a shop that still says CSX on the outside of it, but it was mighty nice of them to do. The office area in the machine shop, it's making progress. Museum displays, volunteers added and expanded on them, which I'll show some pictures of that as well. And then the 2716 appliances were removed, and the rest of the jacket was removed, which was needed for the ultrasound of the boiler and other work that has to be accomplished with it. Also, a trip was made to Pueblo, Colorado, where the Santa Fe, can't remember the number of it, but it's a Santa Fe engine in Pueblo that, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 years ago, they were looking to do a restoration to operation, and that group out there decided to go with a cosmetic restoration, but they had already had the appliances refurbished for it. So there was a swap of air pumps, lubricators, and that sort of thing for the ones that hadn't been refurbished for the ones that had. So they've been brought back ready to go on the engine. Looking ahead to 2024, here late last year, the AMLR grant, which is the Abandoned Mineland Economic Revitalization Program, that was the big announcement last fall of $1.9 million. A lot of that is earmarked for some of the site development, but also 2716 gets a portion of that. That'll go a pretty good chunk of the way on work to be done with it. Also, it's planned to use that to refurbish the fuel racks, and not necessarily to operation, but to refurbish them so they'll look nice, put the track back in over the pits, and get the running track put back in down to the office building. Some other site work is included in that as well. We were hoping that it might go a little farther, but part of that is that it does require any wages that are paid to be paid at prevailing wage rate, not just market. So it gets a little more expensive. I guess for the guys working it, it's a good thing though, because they get paid more. Just won't go as far. Another plan for this year is the glass house from RJ Corman for the QJ is to be erected. That's part of the AMLR grant. Then the office building is going to get a little bit more work on it as well from that. And then, of course, events planned for this year. There's Easter train coming up. There's going to be probably engineer use sessions at some point during the summer, possibly a horn hawk again, which was a popular event with a small group of people, less popular with the people that live across the tracks. And then a whistle blow for the fall after Railroad Festival. Of course, Railroad Festival is also planned. And then Santa Trains is kind of the expected events for this year. Also continued grant writing and discussions continue with CSX as well. I think it's no secret that the at least a portion of the EK that Kentucky Steam would either like to have it or to have somebody friendly towards operations owning it. But that's just, it depends on what they decide. They haven't said no, but they also haven't said yes. So that's about as much as can be said about that. And then there's plans for concerts to begin in the music venue later in 2024 as well. And then I guess aside from that, also, I don't know how many people are aware that Next Gen rail contractors, they're a partner with Kentucky Steam, so they're doing work of their own in the shop as well. Parts of the L&N 152 from the Kentucky Railway Museum are currently in the shop. The boiler is in the shop. The driving wheels are in the shop. And actually yesterday, a tire was removed from, or they started removing the tires from 152's drivers. I've got a picture of that later in the show. So that's kind of a rundown of things that are going on, things that have happened, things that are planned. I guess I'll talk about the pictures. The one that's on the screen now, that was early in 2023. That was when the concert venue was kind of in early construction. Also, CSX had a bunch of cars stored in the yard there. Those cars left sometime in the summer, I believe. And then at the end of Railroad Festival, they got replaced with some other cars. Next slide. This was a shot from the Easter trains. See how bad the baggage car was looking at that time. There's not a lot of space to run down there. Not really a scenic ride, but it's a little something to do. A lot of locals have attended to those kind of things. Next slide. This was from the horn honk. If you're not familiar with what a horn honk is, there's a lot of people out there, or at least a group of people out there, that collect air horns and various kinds. And the horn honk event allowed them to, for a price, bring their horns and put them on a locomotive and make recordings of them and basically run back and forth so that they could hear what their horns sound like. And that's some of the horns out there waiting their turn to go on the locomotive. Next slide. Of course, track work. This was the track 18 that has been there since 2716 came to Ravenna. It was being tamped here. And that section in there has settled quite a bit because a lot of times equipment sits on that when there aren't operations going on because it's close to the building. Next slide. More track work. Next slide. Of course, this was the baggage car got painted. Next slide. Then that was the N&W 6162 before it got the N&W paint on it. Basically, what was done was the NS markings were painted out and replaced with N&W. And then next slide. That's the locomotive that's been used mostly for work around the site there and for train rides. It's actually former L&N 5000, which was the class unit for the SW 1200s. I think eventually it'll probably go back to L&N paint, but right now it's in quasi CSX with the Kentucky Steam logo, and probably will stay in that for a little while, unless somebody comes up and says they really want it painted and has money in hand to do it. So that's nickel plate 587's tender behind it. The 587 was an excursion engine operated out of Noblesville, Indiana. A private owner purchased it when Indiana Transportation Museum went under, and they've stored it down at Kentucky Steam Heritage. As far as I know, they don't have any set plans for it. But I guess a while back it was mentioned that they would like to restore it, but I don't know anything further than that as far as their plans go with it. Next slide. That's the inside of the baggage car after it was painted. and the lighting, that helps a lot. It was very much a dark tunnel before. Next slide. That's outside of it after painting. Next slide. This was the Hardy Oil Pavilion, literally as it was completed. This was during the Railroad Festival. The electricians were out there still working on wiring the day before the Railroad Festival. In fact, one of the food vendors came in and wanted to start cooking, and we actually had to drag a generator out there for them to be able to start cooking because the electricians were still a couple hours from getting electricity to them. Next slide. This was during the Railroad Festival also. That pavilion did get used some during the festival, but the space to sit was limited because the work on the lawn was not completed in time to grow grass, so it was kind of limited to the area that was used. Next slide. So this is Barney Gramling's Jetto Coal Company engine. It's been used for Railroad Festival as well as the whistle blow that was done in October. That's me on the fireman's seat box there as we're getting ready to back through the shop. Next slide. 2716 has gotten some more disassembly here late in the year. As you can see, the cab has now been removed. The domes have been removed and are laying next to it there. The rest of the jacketing has been removed. So it's close to having further work done to it once the funds become available and volunteer labor is available. Next slide. This is the fuel rack area as it currently stands. Again, part of the AMLR grant is to get the tracks back in over the pits and to restore the appearance of the fuel rack. Surprisingly enough, that went out of service about 2001, and when they reconnected power and everything there and turned the switch on, all the lights on the fuel rack actually came back on, surprisingly. But they're those old gym type light fixtures that, you know, cost like $100 a minute to run. So you never really see them on. That eventually part of that plan too is to put LEDs in the fixtures so that they're more economical to operate. Next slide. There's a little sample of what the fuel and sand rack should look like, where it's kind of been repainted. See 2716 in the background there as well. Next slide. There's another view of the 2716 along with Barney Gramling's engine behind it. You can see in this shot too that the outside side sheets of the firebox have been welded in now. The inside side sheets still need to go back in it, but they are prepared, ready to be drilled. And then of course you can see all of the rest of the appliances were removed as well, except for, I believe you got a dynamo still up there, but all the major appliances have been removed. Next slide. There's another shot of the Hardy Pavilion, and then the box cars that CSX currently have stored. They've got a bunch of 50-foot box cars down there. They're pretty much all down to the last couple of years before they go dead, but they've got them down there anyway. Next slide. There's still, that's part of the Great Lawn there. It's been seeded and starting to grow. And then the cars in the background, those are former Ringling Brothers cars. They belong to Pax Rail. They just have them stored down there currently. There were a couple others, but they left. I don't know how many have heard that the Gettysburg Railroad is getting back into passenger operations, and they purchased a couple of the circus cars to have them refurbished. So those went there, and then there was a generator car that was down there, and it went to US Sugar down in Florida. Next slide. There's a shot in the snow of the Jetto engine. Next slide. This was the photo charter last week. The N&W engine was supposed to be running, but it came up with a little problem. night or day before. So it's also static in this shot, but they kind of move things around with the switcher. The L&N engine, Family Lines engine there, actually doesn't have a prime mover in it at all. It's missing a lot of parts. And the reason it still exists is the Huntington Locomotive Shops, a bunch of former Marshall University alumni over there, took it off the deadline sometime in the 90s, painted it green and white with the Marshall logos, and they set it out by the football stadium on game days, and it sat out at the shop. And then in later years, down at the passenger station in the Carolina track in Huntington. Eventually, here last couple of years ago, CSX was cleaning things out, and they initially gave it to Collis P. Huntington Society over in Huntington. Of course, you know, a lot of us are aware CP Huntington ran into some financial issues with the last New River trains, and they were kind of paring things down because they needed to be able to make some money. They no longer had a place to store this engine, so they ended up donating it to Kentucky Steam, and then CSX actually repainted it in the Huntington Locomotive Shops back to the Family Line scheme, which is probably the first time Huntington Locomotive ever painted a engine Family Line since they were a C&O shop. Next slide. So I mentioned that the shop down there got insulated through the NS grant. You can see the spray and insulation is in place there, but what's happening here is a wood-fired furnace was being built because the original heat source in that shop was gas, which is quite a bit more expensive than wood. So this was a project that's ongoing over the winter as to build this thing. That was they were setting it up. It's actually a LP gas tank or propane tank that's been repurposed, and the legs on it are flues off the L&N 152. Next slide. I mentioned the Ring of Fire. This is L&N 152's driver. One of the drivers with tire removed, and the Ring of Fire is still on it, and it's lit up there. They light that up, that heats the tire, expands it, and it will allow you to hammer it off or onto the wheel hub. So those were they got 2 tires removed on it, and then later this week, I understand the plans are to do the other 2 drivers, so 4 more tires to take off. That's 152's boiler in the background behind it. This is inside the museum. The volunteers in there, several of them are retired L&N railroaders that worked out of Ravenna, and they have kind of taken it upon themselves to repurpose the crew room in the yard office as a museum with various displays, mostly local interests. They've got a few things that are kind of outside the area, but mostly local stuff. Next slide. Now there's another view of some of their displays in there. Next slide. Or that's it. So yeah, that's basically what's going on down there. There's a lot of things yet to be done as far as grants go. The AMLR money is not expected to actually be available until midsummer. So the hope was to have things done a lot sooner that were associated with that grant, but it's probably going to be late in the year, or at least mid-year, before a lot of those things get started due to the nature of the way that those grants work. There is still an infrastructure grant that is the rest of it is being used for some of the work that's being done now in the shop and other places. And then also the rest of the NS grant is going for some of the work that's being done there at the shop. So that's basically it. Any questions?
He was very active. Well, of course, very active in model railroading and real trains and whatever. He's going to give us an update on the Kentucky Steam Heritage I wrote down cooperation, but it should be corporation. My spell check didn't catch that. But I know there've been some doing some stuff recently, and they got a grant. So give it to Thomas here, and he can tell us what's going on. Sure, you can come up here.
Ones that are on camera. Okay. All right. So I brought some photos of some things that have been going on, but I was asked about this time last year if I would accept that goes to the outer two bays because all of the track to the shop had been removed. Kentucky Steam had put track 18 back into the middle bay in order to get 2716 in, and 17 and 19 are just now starting to be put back. The baggage car that's used a good bit during events was painted inside and out because it was really looking shabby. New lettering and interior lighting was made functional. The N&W 6162, which is the SD 40-2 that came from Norfolk Southern, it's recently got a temporary paint job back to its original N&W letters and was actually used in a photo charter last week. Proper paint will be applied later on. This was just, it looks good from 50 feet away, but if you look up close, it isn't really that great, but it looked good for photos. Further site cleanup, paint and touch up at the shop has happened throughout the year. Especially the bottom level of the shop, which was concrete block, was looking pretty shabby. So that was a project volunteers worked on last summer. The office area and machine shop inside the shop building is making a lot of progress. It had been abandoned along with the rest of it when CSX quit using it 20 something years ago. So all of that has been work. So that was something that went on throughout the summer and fall of 2023. Another major project was working on track that exists down there, the running track coming in off of the CSX EK division mainline. Number of ties were replaced, a lot of tamping. Also, work began to put tracks 17 and 19 back in at the shop. An update here. I was asked by others with Kentucky Steam if I would speak since I'm a member of both groups. So I'll give a little update on some things that Kentucky Steam Heritage has done over the last year. Also, some things that are going on in the coming year, and that things that are currently going on down at the shop. So, I think probably what I'll do is I'll kind of go through a quick rundown right now, and then we'll go through the photos and I'll talk about them. As far as 2023 goes, there was a position on the board of directors for the Kentucky Steam Heritage Corporation. So since I'm a member of both organizations and we were asked for